Welcome everyone. I'm Adrienne Tadella and I'm here today with Etienne Chia-ah, a public-private partnership manager, and Alette Gilji, project manager with our West Africa Trade and Investment Hub project. This is the first in our Spotlight series where we showcase Trade Hub's different co-investment partnerships and really dive deep to learn about what makes them unique and what their value add to the economic growth of the region. We will also explore in these episodes the emerging best practices and lessons learned from the Trade Hub's private sector engagement approach. So getting right to it, Etienne, thank you for virtually sitting down with me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Adrienne.
Thank you, thank you. And so you manage the Global Mamas Co-Investment Partnership with the Trade Hub. You're the PPP manager for that grant. Can you tell us about this partnership? What is Global Mamas? What do you hope to achieve with the partnership? And what value will this co-investment grant bring?
Okay, that's a great question. So Global Mamas is a social enterprise that has been in existence for the last 15 years operating in Ghana with a mission, to create a prosperity through financial well-being, financial independence for African women and their families. And this is really achieved through capacity building, where they are trained on producing handmade crafted products, which is then sold to Global Mamas. Mm-hmm. Now, with respect to what we intend to achieve, or what the Trade Hub intends to achieve with this partnership. So this really falls within the Trade Hub's response to COVID-19. As you know, firms, companies have been significantly impacted, and Global Mamas really saw a decrease in about 90% of their sales drop because of the COVID impact. And also there was a complete disruption of their supply chain. So with this partnership, we are hoping to achieve four things. So the first one would be to support Global Mamas recover their export and domestic sales. So we are looking at a total value there of about $1 million across the life of the partnership. And then the second is really about creating and sustaining jobs. So they had about 258 jobs before. And with this partnership, they are also looking to add about 50 odd jobs as well. So making a total of about 343 jobs that will be created and sustained. And there is a high percentage of women involved, which is about 91%. So that's a great number in terms of women empowerment and involvement in economic activities. And then the third objective would be to really build a Global Mamas that's more resilient and prepared for any kind of shock. So in this, we are looking at this partnership to diversify the product lines of Global Mamas as it is today, and also give them the support in terms of launching a new website where they could easily sell their products. So even if there is a disruption, in some years to come, they will still have a channel where they can, sell their products out of Africa. And then the last one is really a fair trade zone that it's been a long time objective for Global Mamas. And with this partnership, they will be realizing, I would say, I'll call it a dream that they have been planning for a very long time. And the added value to having this fair trade zone belt would be for Global Mamas to really have a centralized location, have a centralized production facility that will help them to really cut back on the overhead costs that they have today. And I'll just add that this facility would be eco-friendly, will be super eco-friendly. They are planning to use solar energy or biomass energy as well to power the factory. So those are the kind of four objectives that we are looking to achieve on this.
That's great, and thank you for outlining those objectives and goals. What about their application that made them unique? I think you've started to touch on them when you've outlined who they were, but what made them unique? What were the factors?
So I'm always very motivated, right, when I see
Mm-hmm.
a woman-owned or a
Mm-hmm.
woman-owned and led business because of the challenges women-owned enterprises face, just in terms of raising finances, in terms of just having acceptance, from the male counterparts or from the society. And one of the key things that really touched me with this is the women-owned management that exists. That's one. And then secondly, the fact that you had a lot of women. I just mentioned a while ago that there was 91% of the entire labor force is going to be women.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly that was a key point for me. And then the
Mm-hmm.
second aspect is the reputation. I mean, Global Mamas is a household name. It's been existing for 15 years. They are known for the quality of their products. So
Mm-hmm.
certainly that stood out. And then the last one for me was really the kind of control that they had with their value chain. So they are able to control from end to end, have like a very clear traceability process in terms of all the products that they produce. So these three aspects really made the application really unique, and it stood out for me.
That's great. So then let's dive deeper into the grants application process and Global Mamas now being a partner. Can you go through that process a little bit more for us?
Yeah, so as a whole, the
Mm-hmm.
process took us about 8 months for the
Mm-hmm.
award to be made to Global Mamas. But certainly it started off with the RFA that was launched so it was, I mean, an RFA that was launched by the Trade Hub to kind of support firms that were negatively impacted by the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And with that, applicants could, I mean, applicants, all firms operating within West Africa, or maybe US firms that had operations in West Africa, were eligible to apply. All the applications that were submitted on the deadline were all
Mm-hmm.
evaluated and determinations were made. So those determinations were really twofold, right? So there was a straight reject if maybe the concept that was being proposed by the applicant wasn't meeting the objectives of the RFA, or
Mm-hmm.
there could be the determination of an accept with conditions. So conditions were written for those that were accepted with condition. In the case of Global Mamas, there were a certain number of conditions that they needed to address.
Okay.
And then the subsequent process was to submit these recommendations that the investment committee made to USAID for concurrence.
Mm.
And after we secured the concurrence, or we had received the concurrence of Global Mamas from the US mission, in this case it was USAID West Africa,
Mm-hmm.
we then invited them for a co-creation meeting. And after that process of the co-creation meeting, the technical team, in this case myself, we take the lead in helping them develop the full application itself, and also responding to the conditions that were given or that were issued by the investment committee. Once we were able to clear the conditions with Global Mamas, we got the final approval within the Trade Hub, and then the grants package was being developed by the grants team. And after that process, we submitted the grant package to USAID, that's the contracting officer, for
Mm-hmm.
approval. We received the approval on sometime around the 17th of February. The grant agreement was signed on the 18th, and the implementation of the grants kicked off on the 1st of March, 2021.
So it is a mechanism. It's a pretty comprehensive mechanism from start to finish with, a lot of moving pieces. What were some of the best practices? I know that you also work with other co-investment partnerships as well, and applications. What are the best practices you've seen so far, from that very like comprehensive long process?
Yeah, so it's it's really comprehensive, and it can be
Mm-hmm.
super dynamic as well,
Yes. Yeah.
depending on the applicant. But I have tend to look at five things. It could be more, but I'd
Mm-hmm.
summarize this into 5 points. The first one being you need to set very clear expectations from the beginning. So when we have the initial co-creation meeting that's been led by the grants team, what I do after those meetings is I send out a very detailed email in terms of what we expect, the packages that we expect to receive, and also when we expect to receive at least a first draft that we can conduct the preliminary review. The second practice that I use very regularly is that I own the process. So from end to end, from when the co-creation is done, I take over the process from there and I just control it. So it's like I'm developing an application for myself. I don't certainly write the application, but I just make sure that the process from end to end is being controlled by me. Now, the trick here is when you have too many people working on this and reaching out to the grantees or to the applicants, it gets a little bit confusing because we kind of lay out the information in very different forms, and it gives room for interpretation on things that shouldn't be interpreted wrongly. So I try to really restrict the process and really own it. Of course, we do have colleagues in copy of the communications, or if we are sitting on calls, we have colleagues who are also there. They chime in with their opinions and all of that. But really owning the process is something
you really are the one, coordinating, liaising. Yeah.
Exactly. And then the next thing for me, which has been super helpful, is the checklist, right? So the checklist has like all the documents that they will have to submit, the package, as I would call it. And it's really dynamic. It's really dynamic because it changes from one applicant to another. So in the case of Global Mamas, for instance, they had this fair trade zone, so this factory that they had to construct. So in their checklist, I was actually did include in there to see the design of the factory, to have a layout plan how the factory is going to look at. Because in the environmental review form, which is one of the documents that they had to submit, this design, the dimensioning, all had to figure into it. So when I built out the checklist, I actually did have that point in. So in short, the checklist is super dynamic and it really depends on the activity that is being implemented. And then the fourth point for me is really the collaboration and support, right? So it's not I just mentioned a while ago that I own the process, but I work with colleagues. So there is the people from the grants team, there is the monitoring and evaluation team, there's the gender specialist that also looks at the application. And I also get a lot of guidance from Lotfi, who is the PPP director, in terms of just how we oriented the paper and just have general guidance on it. And then, of course, there's the grants director as well, who really sits at the end of the process and really pushes the packages out to the contracting officer. So there's a lot of collaboration and support that goes in here. Then, in terms of the collaboration as well, the grantees or the applicants also do a phenomenal job, right? Because we have a long list of questions, we have a long list of requirements, and they really also participate a lot just to answer those questions, give those clarifications that we need. So there's a lot of collaboration and support that goes in there. You have to adapt, right? I just mentioned a while ago that the activities, they differ. The applicants, they differ, they have different strengths, they have their weaknesses, and you just have to leverage on the strengths that they have and also compensate for all the weaknesses that they show up. In the case of Global Mamas, I mean, there was a significant weakness with the leverage that they were proposing to the Trade Hub, which was really all grants money. And as you probably know, the leverage component or the co-investment component really needs to be private sector driven. And we do not accept grants funding to form a part of the leverage, which was a significant weakness. But certainly we walked through the process, we explained what we needed, and they worked so well, came back on board with a new proposal in terms of that.
And that's really great, Etienne, that you outlined it in 5 steps. To me, listening to you, I gather that there's so much dialogue too. There's feedback. There's a feedback loop going on, and so when you know, become part of this dynamic co-creation, when you finally start implementing, right? Like you, for the most part, are all on the same page about it, rather than going in blind in that sense,
Exactly,
right?
exactly. It's a painful process, and most of the time, right, what I get from the applicants is that, oh, you guys ask a lot of questions,
Uh-huh.
and we've had some partnerships where they've really been very bold in terms of just being very thankful of the process that we put,
Mm-hmm.
because it just helps them to understand their projects better.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot
Right.
of compliments on that, but in the beginning, I'll tell you that it's a lengthy process. I can't remember how many drafts of the full applications that we had. So the minimum I'll typically have is about 10 or 15, right, to be able to
Wow.
get like the final
Wow.
version of the application package out. So it's a super painful process, but what we've seen is we tend to explain a little bit more the process, why we are doing what we are doing to the applicants.
Mm-hmm.
And once they get the understanding and they see the
Mm-hmm.
value add, most importantly, the value add that it brings to the application, I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
just moves along. It becomes really seamless. And then
And you start building rapport. It's a relationship building process as well. Uh, so this actually opens to right to the our next question is what have been your lessons learned so far?
Um, so particularly for, I'd always have this saying that there is beauty in simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you that most of the applications that we receive, the first one, most of the
Mm-hmm.
times it's just not straightforward. It's just unnecessarily complex, as I would put it, to the extent that when you pick it up, it's very difficult to really get a sense of what they are trying to do, what they are trying, or what they intend to achieve with a potential partnership. And one of the key things I always tell the grantees is that, you know, keep it simple and be straight to the point, which is one
Mm-hmm.
thing that was really, I would say, that watchword for me was really stood out for global mamas who seemed to be they were very complex. They wanted every detail and stuff. So that's a key point or key lesson learned
Mm-hmm.
through the process. Um, the second one is really the dynamic checklist. We spoke about it in terms of, I mean, in the previous question.
Right.
And this, for me, has been was key learning. And just for context, Global Mamas, at least in the portfolio that I managed, was one of the first COVID-19 grants that was awarded. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really the first one that I tried the dynamic checklist on. And it was a great tool. It really helped just following up and just making sure that things were being respected. I mean, the requirements were being respected, the documents that was required were all being submitted. So it was a great tool. And I think on the part of Global Mamas as well, they really appreciated that. And then certainly, the next one is this word co-creation. I mean, there's a lot of interpretation, even though there's a clear definition of
Yeah.
what a
Right.
co-creation is, but everybody had their own definition to it. And one of the things that I really learned out of this process is that you as the PPP manager or you as the PPP leading the transaction, you really have to get to dirty your hands and really do some of the heavy lifting. So
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't really serve the applicants, right? When you keep sending all the list of questions for really very straightforward things that you could certainly just include or maybe correct on the application package, or maybe if it's in the budget as well, that you could actually bring those changes in. So with Global Mamas, I really took the lead, and I could see that the time lag between when I requested for the change and when I was actually getting the changes done myself really reduced significantly. So for me, it was a great lesson learned, and that I'm implementing across the other applicants that I'm working with. And then there is the point about um, um, the phone calls or the meetings on Teams that we had with them, because there
Mm-hmm.
were points
Mm-hmm.
where where we had the questions, but there was, I would say, in terms of just comprehension of the question or what we really needed. And on a simple 10, 15 minutes call, we would come to a conclusion, we would come to a solution in terms of what needs to be done and what has to be included. So that was really great. And then for me, for Global Mamas, what I learned is you really need to, even as you work on the full application package, you really have to look at the bigger picture in terms of just visualizing what the grants or how the grants package would look like. Most importantly, what will be the milestones on this grant award? And once you have that bigger picture, you just kind of fit that into the request, into what you want to see from the applicants. And that's something that I would say that is something I really learned out of the process, which we are increasingly, applying across all the applicants, all the grantees that we've worked with. And then the last one is that I have never known that water hyacinth could be used to produce packaging material. So it was really a big learning. It was really a big learning for me, and I had to go onto Google and really just search to be sure that do they really know what they're talking about? And coming from having grown up in a part where we saw a lot of this water hyacinth just being waste, and I was like, yeah, this is really something. So it's something that stood out for me in the process.
No, that is great to, as technical as the process can be, sometimes or most of the times there's these little moments where, especially with this particular partnership, where you're like, I did not know that water hyacinths can be used as packaging material. Thank you for that, Etienne. All good lessons learned and best practices, and these are really the things that we want to showcase to creative staff about what we're learning. And so for the last set of questions that I have for this episode, what are you looking forward to with the partnership with Global Mamas?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hitting those objectives. So those objectives in terms of the sales, in terms of sustaining and creating those new jobs, having the new factory built, and also launching the new website. So for me, those ones they are key. But most importantly, I want to see a more resilient Global Mamas, right, come out of this. Really come out of this support that that the Trade Hub has really given to them. Now, losing 90% of your sales, it's never an easy feat to really come out of. So it's really what I'm looking forward to in this partnership.
And lastly, what do you hope to learn from, we'll take it out, zoom out a little bit from a private sector engagement standpoint now, and looking at how Trade Hub has approached PSE. What do you hope to learn from this partnership around private sector engagement?
So for me, it's really the power of blended financing to support social businesses to be a part of being self-reliant. So Global Mamas had a history of depending on grants. And I think I mentioned a while ago that when we had the initial leverage that was proposed, it was all grants. And so in this, I'm hoping, right, just to kind of get a confirmation that blended finance approach could be a very successful tool, could be a very powerful tool just to facilitate these social businesses in their path to being self-reliant. Yes.
Great. Anything those are all my questions for you. Anything else that you would like to add?
Well, but just to thank you. I mean, they were really very great questions. And when we work on these packages, we have very little time to reflect in terms of what we do or how much we get done when we are supporting these applicants or the potential grantees, as we call them. So this was really great. It was a great exercise to really step back, and just look at the process from a different angle and see. And I think it will help as well, just in terms of that continuous improvement and making sure that we get better at what we do. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I second that sentiment fully, that some, to improve and to enhance, it is important for a project to take a step back and reflect on the learning. And I do know, having collaborated with the Trade Hub team a lot more, that there is a good learning approach that you all are taking. So thank you. So many exciting things in store for Global Mamas, and so good luck with reaching those goals and objectives and beyond that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Andre.